Ladies and gentlemen, we start. Thank you. Thank you very much for the last presentation. We will welcome Tanguy Fardet, who is a research officer at OCAPI programme, au laboratoire Eau, Environnement et Systèmes Urbains. He comes from the Ecole des Ponts, ParisTech. He considers all organic matter, from food residues to human urine and feces, may be converted into amendment and fertilizer to bring the nutrients they contain back to agricultural parcel. So thank you very much, Tanguy.
So thanks for having me. So indeed, I'll talk about pathways for circular agri-food ecosystems, and I'll focus on excreta as a way to reconnect urban and rural areas. So this might seem a bit surprising at first, but hopefully you should understand the rationale behind it very quickly. So, well, this was already hinted at earlier, but so I came on this research topic from a metabolic perspective. So as was mentioned, we are already exceeding several planetary boundaries. If we talk about agriculture, the thing is, we're actually talking about most of the 5 exceeded boundaries. So phosphorus and nitrogen, land system change, biosphere integrity, climate change, and novel entities. And one of the reasons that we're exceeding these planetary boundaries is that countries from the global north, so mostly Western industrialized countries, are using way more than their fair share of resources. So for instance, here you can see for the US, the carbon footprint because of everything they're importing from all over the world. But this is true for a lot of other countries. And the thing is, the Western cities tend to behave like the countries they belong to. So they import large amount of resources from all over the world, way beyond their spatial extension. And then they export very poorly reusable matter, so that we call waste because of the way it is handled. And for human excreta, this is very sad because it's actually full of resources. So plants, like this carrot here, they need nutrients to grow. So mostly nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And once the carrot is grown, we're going to eat it. And if you're an adult human and you stop growing and your weight is mostly stable, then you're going to excrete the same amount of nutrients that you ingested. So everything that was in the carrot is going to end up in urine and feces, mostly. And so for a mega city like Paris and the surrounding cities, in a week, this is equivalent to almost 600 tons of nitrogen, 60 tons of phosphorus, and 150 tons of potassium. So for nitrogen, it's mostly in urine, phosphorus is in urine and feces, and potassium is like more evenly distributed. The problem is that we don't use these as a resource in agriculture. What we do is that we flush them down the toilets, mostly in potable water to add insult to the injury, but that's not even the main issue. Because when it goes into the sewers, it gets mixed with everything else, the chemicals, the heavy metals that go into the sewers, and ends up in the wastewater treatment plants. The thing is, the wastewater treatment plant was not designed to recover the nutrients. It's been put there to try to reduce the amount of pollution that we're sending into the rivers. And so what it does is that it's going to destroy most of the nitrogen that we paid dearly to make with the Haber-Bosch process, as was mentioned earlier. And it sends it back into the atmosphere, mostly as N2. For phosphorus, it's a bit better. We recover almost half of it, for instance, in France, but it's in the sludge. So it's mixed with all the chemicals, and it's really not a very nice matter to work with. Furthermore, the wastewater treatment plant doesn't really deal with most of the bacteria and viruses, so these are going to end up also in the water. And because of the huge load in terms of nutrients that we put into the wastewater treatment plant, a lot of the nutrients are actually still going into the river, and this causes what is called eutrophication, which is the excess of nutrients that is going to cause algae blooms in the rivers, lakes, or the sea that are very harmful for the local fauna and flora, but that can also hurt humans in some cases. So how do we go from this very linear, extractivist and destructive systems to something more sustainable? Well, first of all, one of the main issue here is the reliance on fossil fuels and fossil resources in general. So this is an ammonia factory plant with the Haber-Bosch process. So as was mentioned, this needs a lot of energy and gas. For phosphorus, it's mines and is very finite resource. So some people think that by 2030, we're going to reach peak phosphorus production. So this is like almost tomorrow. Really we need to stop destroying these resources or sending them to the sea and using them more sustainably. Currently, they are mostly used in industrial agriculture, where we over-apply them. So this leads to runoff that causes additional pollution. And the plants that we grow mostly go to feed cattle, which is quite inefficient. And since it's also usually industrial cattle production, we don't really handle the excretions of the cattle, and this leads to further pollution, and then there's human excretions that I already mentioned. So obviously the idea is to go to something more circular, where we have ecological agriculture that is mostly destined to feed humans instead of cattle, and then reusing the organic matter generated by humans, so urine, feces, kitchen waste, to make bio-based fertilizers that then we can use again in the ecological agriculture. And just to make sure this is clear, the stakes of human manure is huge. Like worldwide, we're producing every year 100 megatons of nitrogen, 3 megatons of phosphorus, and 5 megatons of potassium. And this is to compare with what we are actually using in agriculture, which is 117 and 33 megatons, respectively. So it is a significant fraction. And there is... Oh, sorry. Coming back, okay. There is a recent paper from Bilen et al. That looked at the case of Europe and showed that it would be possible to feed the whole European population from crops on European soil using fully organic farming just by cutting meat consumption in half and recovering the nutrients present in human urine, notably. So this is really a lot of potential there. So how do we recover human excreta? Well, in the long run, we believe that the alternative that makes most sense is waterless toilets, because you avoid using water, which is going to be a scarce resources already now, but even more so in the future. And you avoid the problem of diluting your nutrients or mixing them with other chemicals, etc. But obviously this is not going to happen overnight, so there are people also working on improving wastewater treatment plants to recover more nutrients, but this is intrinsically limited in what we can hope to recover. So in the long run, we think that this is the main way to go. And once you think about this, the team in which I'm working has been mostly focusing on urine source separation. First of all, because we produce large amount of urine every day, and this is where most of the nitrogen is, but also because it is self-sanitizing. So compared to feces, you avoid a lot of health issues, and it's also liquid, so you can use pipes. It is quite convenient. So for instance, just switching standard urinals to waterless urinals and collecting the urine into urine tanks would already give us large deposits of nutrients that we could use more or less easily. And once you have urine, you can make a lot of different types of fertilizers with it. I just put one here that is already available on the market if you want to pass it around so people can see. So there are already many ways to use urine in agriculture. So I mentioned the team I'm working with. So it's part of the OCAPI program, where we use systemic and transdisciplinary approaches to see like what could happen for urine and feces use in agriculture. And so we try to look at all the actors of the supply and value chain, taking into account potential dietary changes, the specificity of various territories, and obviously the environmental and health impacts and benefits. So it's split into 4 main axes that, of course, work together. So I'm part of the metabolic axis. There's also the agronomic axis, the sociological axis, and one dedicated to demonstrators, so actual implementation either in the field or in cities. It is very slow. I don't know whether it went to the next slide or not. Let's try it again. Okay, so you have a full team there that is focused on reinstating urine and feces. So in French we say redorer le blason, so making them golden again in the mind of the general public. So within the OCAPI program, I work on the CAFE project, which stands for Circular Agri-Food Ecosystems. And I look at territorial scenario to see how we could move towards nutrient circularity and food sufficiency. And so I try to account for urine, feces, and biowaste in urban areas with an explicit focus on how we could use it in agriculture afterwards, by opposition to, for instance, energetic use. So my goal is to provide tools for the local actors to be able to discuss what they want to do and see how different decisions could affect nutrient circularity, the quality of the resources that are returned to the soil, and also affect the environmental impacts and the resilience of the system. So to do that, I first try to quantify the deposits in urban areas. And so I look at physiological databases to see how much urine or feces or biowaste humans are generating. And I try then to locate the excretions. So where are we generating urine, feces, biowaste? And to do that, I need to find who the excreting population is and where it is. And the excreting population is different from the resident population because people move around, they go to work, etc. And so I use demographics data from the French government, for instance, to see like what happens at work, what happens at home. And this gives me maps like this one. So this is Paris and the surrounding cities, so totaling almost 6 million inhabitants. And the pie charts, they give you the size of the deposit, and the color gives you where it is generated. So black is at home, dark gray at school, and light gray at work. So you can see, for instance, that in the center of Paris here, almost nobody's leaving because it's too expensive. So it's mostly people working there. And so the pies are almost exclusively light gray, and people are rather living like on the periphery of Paris or in the towns nearby. And the colors of the background give you the density of nitrogen production here. So it is densest in the center of Paris, and then it gets lighter as you go away from the center. And in terms of how much we produce, well, in a week. Well, in a week, it's almost 68 kilotons of urine, 12 kilotons of biowaste, of which 8 are food, and almost 6 kilotons of feces. And obviously then I look at how much nutrient is in this different organic matters, and this gives you the chart that you saw before. It's a little more interesting if we look at Reims instead of Paris, because for Reims we can see the agricultural parcels nearby. So for Paris they are so far away that it was complicated to show them. So near Reims you have almost 150,000 hectares of agricultural parcels, and depending on how much fertilizer they apply on it, they would use probably between 3 and 15 kilotons of nitrogen per year. And that's to compare with what is produced, so that's mostly within the town of Reims, but also a bit in a few towns around. That's 1.4 kilotons of nitrogen. So you could produce between 10 and 50% of what is currently used, like quite far from us already. So here the idea is really to see how we could make it so that, of course, cities import to feed their population, but then they can export something valuable for the farmers. So here, fertilizer. So that's what I've been doing so far. In the future, what I want to do is to go further into details in terms of the spatial analysis, so down to the building scale. And so I take the maps and the buildings here in orange and the roads in blue, and from this I build networks where the road intersections are in gray and the buildings are in red. I connect them together, and using this I can start looking at the different travel modes. So for instance, if people want to bring their food waste to a composting spot, like where should we put the composting spots so that they don't walk more than, let's say, 5 minutes? If we collect the urine or the feces with trucks or things like that, like what would be the travels for the collection and then to bring to the transformation unit, etc., etc. And so using this, I hope to be able to provide a logistics-aware analysis. So depending on the choices of collection methods, the frequency and the travel mode, and also then depending on the transformation method. So, for instance, for feces and bio-waste, this would be mostly composting and anaerobic digestion. For urine, could be storage or various transformation processes, such as concentration to make the fertilizer that is somewhere in the room. And then we know that on the parcels, they only apply the nutrients at specific times. So since we're generating these nutrients continuously, there's also a need for storing them until they're actually needed. So this is going to give us some constraints in terms of storage size. And taken all together, this can then help us analyze the logistics impacts using, for instance, life cycle analysis. All right, so I'll wrap up. I would just like first to thank the whole OCAPI team with which I'm working. So I'm applying these tools that I've been showing you on specific territories. So for instance, we have a project here near Lyon. We also work with farmers. So here is, for instance, fertirrigation of spinach using urine. And we've grown wheat by fertilizing it with urine to make biscuits. So you can also pass this around. I'm sorry, I didn't expect that there would be so many people, so I'm not sure there will be enough. So if you are there with people you know, maybe you can share one so that there is enough for everybody. So yeah, we've been doing a lot of things with research and action, like around Paris, but also other cities. I'm also working with Lidia, which is also in TBI, for the life cycle analysis, with Barbara Redlingshofer for the food part, and other people from Toulouse that are also focusing also on the wastewater treatment plants. All right, so I'll conclude there. So just to sum up, so I'm really looking at the deposits of organic matter and the nutrients that are within there, and seeing what the logistics would be to collect them, transform them, and bring them back to agricultural parcels, so that taken together, this gives me, this enables me to compute the life cycle assessment of this whole supply chain. So if you want to know more about OCAPI, there is a website, and you can find us on social networks. There's also a specific website for CAFE, and if you want to look into more details on how I'm doing this, all the code is open source, so you can find it online. Okay, so I'll stop here. Thanks for your attention, and if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Tanguy. Any questions? You can try. Vous pouvez vous présenter, s'il vous plaît?
Thank you very much for super talk. I'm Maria from University of France. Just a question, how we need to treat our waste before using? I mean, we are also source of some organic contaminants and...
Yeah, so that varies a lot depending on the matter. So the pathogens are mostly in the feces. So for instance, there, if you compost it or for anaerobic digestion, there is specific temperatures or time that needs to be used to make sure that most of the pathogens are degraded. The thing is, usually any way you do it is usually not worse than what we are currently doing, because, as I mentioned, the wastewater treatment plants, they don't deal with the pathogens. So when you put sludge on the fields, you're putting the pathogens on the field. And for urine, if you're simply storing it without processing it, the WHO says that it's good to put it at least 3 and up to 6 months, so that all the pathogens have been sterilized. But if you transform it, for instance, if you extract ammonium sulfate or things like that, then there's no need to take any specific precaution, because there won't be any pathogen in the final product. Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions? Excuse-moi, Claudia.
Tu crois? Hi, thanks for the inspiring talk, I have to say. I'm Claudia Cosio, so he asked me to introduce myself. I'm a professor at the University of France, and I work in ecotoxicology. I was wondering if we could simply collect at home the urine and use it as a nutriment for your plants. Is there, I mean, I guess when you treat it, it helps to keep it longer?
So the main issue with urine, if you don't do anything to it, is urea converts into ammonia fairly quickly. And ammonia is very volatile, so it's going to go into the atmosphere.
Okay.
So you lose a lot of it, and ammonia is not a great molecule, so you want to limit this. So either you can stabilize it, maybe I'll go back to the slides. Either you can stabilize it to avoid this by either raising or lowering the pH, or you can transform it, but it's not strictly necessary. I mean, you can use urine directly at home. This is what I do for my plants. The orchids, for instance, are very happy with urine instead of the orchid-specific fertilizer. So yeah, I mean, as long as you're not taking very specific and harmful medication, there's no issue with using urine at home. And in general, this is actually fine. Like, you are allowed to use urine and feces on in your home. There's no problem with it. So yeah, this was stored urine. You can either acidify it or alkalinize it if you want to make sure you don't lose ammonia. But otherwise, you can also just at home use it directly. You dilute it into water to not burn the plants. So for instance, in my case, I dilute it like 2 or 3 times, and then you can use it directly on the plants.
And my second question is just curiosity, but how much is it sold? Like the bottles? Do you have an idea of the price?
I'm sorry, I have no idea, but I mean, you can look it up. So this has been approved for use at least in Switzerland, and I think also probably in Germany and maybe Belgium. I'm not sure, but so it's a product that you can buy. So if you look it up, you'll see.
I have another question. Yes, just do you think it works to add to the list water? I mean, so you collect urine and after you transfer it to some industry to have nitrogen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and water.
Yes, so there are actually people that are looking into like high-tech toilets where the urine is directly processed in it, and so you recover distilled water. So depending on the types of treatment that you choose, some of them will produce distilled water in the end. So you can indeed recover water And so in their case, it's more, I think, economic, because you can actually sell distilled water for a significant price. So it helps with the economic model. Yeah.
Any questions? Allez, c'est parti.
Thank you for your inspiring talk. I'm a PhD student in the Reims Regard Lab. I just have a question. Are you working about people readiness to use such toilets and such products? Thank you.
Yeah. So I guess there are two ways of looking at it. From the producers, so like general public, and for the farmers. So we've been working with both. Usually for people, as soon as they understand the stakes, they are like they completely understand the rationale and they're willing to make some efforts to make this feasible. Furthermore, there are some toilets where is it good? Yes, I think so. Like using some of these toilets is really no different from using a typical toilet. So for instance, this one, I've tried myself. So there is a rotating, how is it called? I don't know in English. I'm sorry, I have a blank, but there's like something inside the toilet that is turning, and so the feces go on it, and then you press the button, like flushing the toilet, and it rotates, and there is a metallic tool that scraps the feces, and then it just comes back to its original position. It's clean, and so I mean you've done nothing specific. It's just that it's stored inside here with air that is that goes inside the toilet and then goes directly outside. And so the only thing is that every month you will need to collect the feces that are inside the box, but it doesn't smell. You don't do anything specific. So in terms of, for people, it doesn't really change anything except that you need to know that either somebody is coming every month to collect it, or you have to take it out and bring it somewhere every month. So on that side, it's not that difficult a priori. And for the farmers, it's more of a question of how, under which form we're bringing it to them, because usually it's different from the type of fertilizer they are using. So it requires some adaptation, which is not always easy. And then there's the matter of the cost. Yeah. So for farmers, it's a little more complicated technically, but there are not necessarily any issues there that cannot be solved. Yeah.
Any questions? No, I have one question. Are you working with scientists specialized in retro innovation and the concept of low tech?
Not directly. So I am familiar with the concept. Here we are trying, because we're doing research action, in the way we implement things, we are quite sensitive to these issues of low tech. I mean, it also comes down in this notion of resilience. So in my mind, low tech and resilience are quite strongly intertwined. So we keep this in mind, but we're not working with specialists on these issues.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tanguy. Any questions? Okay. Bon,